Hello, and welcome to all the truth seekers that have joined us today from around the world. I'm glad that you've decided to join this online community. For the next hour, GMDC will help you uncover new ideas that will push your thinking inside and outside of your business. My name is Mark McKelsey, and I lead the people and the projects that bring you insights, shopper trends, and next practices from Global Market Development Center. This Infocast will make your lunch hour profitable by demonstrating just how the curiosity and the power of the consumer must be at the center of your strategy. In other words, the way you've done things in the past is not the way your future success will happen. Retailers and brands, more than ever, must be adaptive and in constant flux in order to connect with evolving populations. So, how you respond to the session is very important. Without further ado, we'll jump into it. I'm coming to you live from Colorado Springs, and have Andrea from Ideoclick joining us from her Seattle office today. This Infocast will help you understand why so many brands fear Amazon's private label strategy and what you can do to compete. It's true that the private label phenomenon helped the e-com giant serve more customers while mitigating its risk and make them the everything store that they are today. At the same time, it has inspired their strategy and given enlightenment and learnings to so many micro brands as to how to produce even better go-to-market strategies. While we've seen Amazon double down on its private label initiative, especially lately, the shock and awe with bigger brands continues to become heavier. As Amazon continues to seek out even higher profits, adding more robust private label items to its portfolio, it certainly is a natural conclusion to continue to do so. The problem is, this comes at a time where brands are more and more relying on Amazon for a majority stake of their sales. And now the hand that was feeding them is also biting them. Brands also want to know how their big data is used in the Amazon ecosystem because they fear it's actually fueling the private label industry that they're driving. The history of Amazon's private label strategy is certainly not new, and some brands saw this coming 10 plus years ago and braced themselves. It started with commodity products such as batteries and USB cables, then slowly expanded to diapers and wipes. Today, it ranges from toys to shoes to food and even mattresses. Amazon has a keen understanding of what share of spend that they can attack on and knows their customers well enough to figure out what their propensity is between needing to make a trip to the store or pick up the phone and order something through a Prime Amazon account. That's what's driving their strategy against private label. Amazon knows its own loyalty and brand equity is there, so they're leveraging it wherever they can. With that said, Andrea, would you help our viewers know more about what they can expect to learn today?
Absolutely. We're going to talk today about, we'll do a deep dive into private label on Amazon. We'll talk about the size, whether we should be scared of it or not. Then we'll talk about some key strategies that you can take back to your business today to effectively compete. And those will be really around defending your products, learning from private label, and really having strong communication with Amazon.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Before we get started and dive in, I'd like to remind our viewers that we'll take questions during or after the session by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat feature. Don't use that. Just use the Q&A button, and we'll go through all those questions and get to them at the end of the hour. So let's get started. Back over to you, Andrea.
Great. So thanks a lot for having me today. It's nice to be back. Today we're going to talk about Amazon's private label. Is it something to be feared or is it something to learn from? And I think it's a little bit of both. At least we're seeing with our clients that it's a little bit of both. So today we'll do a deep dive into private label. We're going to talk about the size of it, some of the key brands, what Amazon's doing in this space, why they're doing it, and what their aspirations are. And then we'll talk through kind of 3 different strategies that you can take back today to your business to effectively compete. Specifically, we're going to walk through, how do you defend your products against Amazon private label? And what are some of the ways that you can learn from the private label launches in your category? And then we'll also talk about ways to be vocal with Amazon and communicate with them. Tell them that you're unhappy with it. Use it in your negotiation. And then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and we'll take questions from the group. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Andrea Lay. I am a VP of Strategy and Insights at Ideoclick. We'll talk about Ideoclick in a minute, but I spent 10 years at Amazon as a category leader. I worked across about 15 different product categories at Amazon in my time there, but spent most of my time in consumables and have 27 years now in retail. Starting with a graduate school studying how shoppers bought produce, hiding behind the aisles and making note of whether they touched or smelled it. And I also write articles related to Amazon and e-commerce. You can find me on LinkedIn and read some things there. Ideoclick is a managed services provider. We help manufacturers go to market and manage their business on Amazon. We do that through strategy setting, catalog management, writing content. We have proprietary software for keyword bidding on Amazon, also DSP support, retail FBA operations. We've been doing this for about 10 years, and we serve around 250 manufacturers on Amazon. And this is our leadership team. We have about 100 employees here in Seattle. Our co-founders, Justin and Tom, are both former Amazon. Justin is actually my husband. Isn't he handsome? And across our organization, about 150 years of collective past Amazon experience last time we did a count. So let's dive right in. So first, I think we're all aware of this, but Amazon is a disruptor. They disrupt pretty much every industry that they enter. And I think, there was a quote from Jeff Bezos at one point saying something about how if you'd asked consumers, they would have never said that they want an Alexa device in their houses, a black cylinder that plays music and looks up things on Wikipedia. But now we have them. I think I have 7 of them in my house. And they've really kind of, helped kind of improve some efficiencies in people's lives. And the one thing that Amazon has in common with across all of the industries they've disrupted, you can look at the movie industry, healthcare, publishing, transportation, cloud computing, is that they really started with the customer and worked backward. And that's something that they've definitely applied to their private label, and we'll look at some really specific examples of that today. And it's really easy to think of Amazon as highly successful, and of course they are. But I think what you don't see, or we don't spend as much talking about, are kind of all the bloopers. And the same is happening with private labels. So they're throwing a lot of things at the wall to see what sticks. And even just within the private label space during my time there, when I ran the baby category, we launched private label baby bedding, and I was given the task of choosing the prints that we would put on the crib sheets, and then at the end of the season liquidating all of it because we were wrong and baby bedding wasn't successful. There were some failed launches of plus size apparel and school uniforms, and those were years and years ago. So Amazon's constantly innovating and throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that definitely applies to their private label practice as well, which we'll talk about. So what's going on here? Here's what we hear from manufacturers. We hear, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. I think a lot of it is warranted, but it's not time to give up. It's not unlike private label from your private label competition in brick and mortar. It's a little scarier. Amazon has a lot more data. But it's also important to remember that they're not manufacturers, and they don't have kind of the expertise that a lot of you have in truly understanding, product development, how to understand your customer. We'll talk about, some ways Amazon does that well and doesn't do that well. But I think, the question we always get is, why is Amazon doing this? Like, why are they launching hundreds of private label products? And really it comes down to driving their flywheel. It's no surprise that more assortment on the site improves the customer experience. I think it also comes down a lot to profit margins. So a lot of the private label brands that they have launched have been in categories or in subcategories that are traditionally pretty profit challenged, where they're engaging in a lot of crap out activity. And so, they're able to have an offer there where they can potentially make money. So there's obviously a profit consideration. I think there's also a consideration around customer experience, really defining what matters to the customer. It kind of varies by category and by private label, which we'll talk about. But I think the most important takeaway is we are all very focused on what Amazon is doing on their platform. So we're spending a lot of time worrying about if they're pushing down our search results and putting ads on our pages. And all those things are really scary and sometimes feel predatory. But at the same time, we're not thinking about Amazon's long-term aspirations. And I believe their long-term aspirations are building brands that are sold off channel. So not necessarily only sold on Amazon, but sold at other retailers as well. And when you look at their past couple of earnings releases, growth's really slowing. And the impact of One Day Prime has helped kind of propel some of their growth a little bit. But the retail growth is struggling, and they have to find other places to get it. And 50%-ish of product searches start on Amazon, but the other half of them start other places, Google, manufacturer websites, whatever. And Amazon wants that traffic from those other retailers, and they want, they need that growth. So, we have at least a couple examples of Amazon kind of working with manufacturers on, exclusive product that, or co-branded product or whatever that's gonna get pushed out to other retailers. And I think that program's probably pretty much in its infancy, but it's important to think about what Amazon's long-term aspirations are. Now, do we think that Target's ever going to sell Amazon Basics? I don't know, that might be a tough sell, but do we think that at some point another fashion retailer might take Larkin Row? Maybe. Right. So I think we should just really think about kind of Amazon's long-term goals in this space. So should we be scared of private label? It was about $7.5 billion in 2018. They're expecting it to close in on 20 billion by next year. It's really hard to tell the difference between product exclusives, so like the Manufacturer Accelerator Program, which some of you may be participating in, versus actual private label that's produced by Amazon. And I think that's intentional. Like they want some opacity there, so you don't really understand kind of what the strategy is and what's happening behind the scenes. I think it's mostly their those sales numbers are mostly capturing a lot of the Echo devices, the tablets, the Whole Foods acquisition. And the sales happening in the other categories are still relatively small. I mean, an Amazon spokesperson was quoted as saying that private label is less than 1% of their total sales. And that it's totally true that that's much less than other retailers. I think when you look across the spectrum, it's typically more in the 10 to 25% range of private label, for grocery or Target or whatever. Target's probably even more. So it's a small number right now. But if you are one of these manufacturers, it does not feel small, right? Like you've got Amazon copying the product packaging, really trying to make it look like your product. And while it's not any different than brick and mortar doing this, they have a lot of data behind their launches that's really helping them be successful. So I do think that we should be we should be a little bit scared and we should be a little bit worried. But I do think there are some tactics that you can take to effectively compete. So how do you even know if Amazon has private label launching on your products? Like is this knowable? How do we know this? And it is. I mean, a good best practice is to be searching your product kind of on a regular basis. And, when you search the product, you'll typically find, and you should look at some of the more profit challenged products or top selling products, because obviously those are the ones Amazon's gonna be most attracted to from a private label perspective. But search your products, you'll typically see a banner in search results showcasing some of Amazon's private label products. If you go to some of your product detail pages, you may see one of the ads that says recommended from our brands. And then in our kind of websites, I have a slide at the end and you guys will all get this deck. There's a couple of sites that, including Amazon, that actually showcase every single private label brand. So you can get an exhaustive list of the categories that they're in and sort of what they're doing to look. So first step is, if you don't already know, if you have private label competing with you, to take a look and see what's going on there. And, you might also notice that it's not a direct competition. Like it might be in a slightly different subcategory, but they're still putting the ads on your pages, and they're still pushing your search results down the page. So what do you do? Let's say you are one of these brands here, you know, you're Neutrogena or Tide, and Amazon's created a knockoff. Like, what do you do about this? So we'll talk about 3 strategies that you can take to effectively compete. So the first one is to go on the defensive. You know, just like you would with any other new competitor that's growing really quickly, you would really kind of take a look at, you know, what's the impact of this competitor on your business. You might make some comparisons between your product and theirs, maybe make some adjustments either to your PDPs on Amazon, your hero images, or to the actual product if there are some features that are really winning. And then, you know, looking for the points of differentiation. So figuring out, you know, where is your product different? How can you showcase that in your PDPs? We'll walk through some examples of all of these. And then just continuing that exercise as they continue to roll out private label and expand upon some of the brands, you know, that they've launched, continuing to really take a hard look and see sort of what seems to be working. So the first one is taking a look at what the impact of the private label is having on search. Search is everything on Amazon. Everyone searches. It doesn't matter if you're on mobile or desktop or tablet or what you're shopping on. Everyone starts their product journey with search, and pretty much 90% of consumers. So getting on that first page is key. You probably have all heard that before. But really understanding the impact of the private label on the search results for the key terms that are critical for your category is going to give you an upstream indicator of whether you're going to experience any sort of market share loss on Amazon to the private label. So I'm going to walk through an example that we did for a client with the client masked out of here. But we have some share of search reporting. There are lots of providers that you can get this from. If you don't already have some kind of share of search reporting, you should get some. It's really critical in order to help you build an effective strategy. So in this case, we have a baby food client. Mama Bear is Amazon's private label in baby food. And so we really wanted to see, like, where is Mama Bear gaining ground in terms of share of search results for some of these key terms. So all the terms are on the left, and you can see Mama Bear, and you can also see a couple other competitors, competitor A and the client. And let's take a look at, you know, is Mama Bear getting any traction for some of these key terms that we know we want to win? Well, you can see here, wherever there's nothing, they don't have any share of search on that page. So those are opportunities. Those are the opportunities to go in from an advertising perspective and a paid search perspective, and maybe even a content perspective, and, you know, try to get more share of search on those pages, because that's where Amazon doesn't have a presence or isn't strategically bidding. And then we can also see where they are having an impact. So this baby food term that I've circled here, you know, they've got 12% share of search on that in the top 10, and 3% of the whole first page of search. So, you know, in this case, that's a keyword where we might want to increase our spend, right? Like, sometimes it's going to cost a little bit of money to compete, just like any other, you know, new entrant into your market. You're going to have to figure out how to get more strategic, but it doesn't always have to mean that. You know, there are a lot of terms on here where Amazon's not winning at all, and they're not gaining traction. So, you know, in this case, we were able to increase spend on this particular keyword, drive a higher share of search for the client. And the other thing you can get through share of search or digital shelf reporting or whatever you get from your provider is some comparisons. So we were able to compare the search average selling price, the star ratings, the reviews for the search results for all of these terms across the client, Mama Bear, the private label, and other competitors. And what we were able to do here is identify that they were all priced lower, which you can't control your price on Amazon unless you're a seller. But it sort of notified us that some of these competitors, and particularly Mama Bear, were selling the baby food in a smaller pack size. So that was encouraging trial, and customers appeared to like that. It was in some of the reviews. So the action item there was, let's take a look at whether it makes sense for us to also launch a smaller pack size to help encourage trial. So these are some of the insights that you can get in kind of looking at the impact on the business and doing some comparisons. So, also I think it's important to focus on differentiation. So in that case, the Mama Bear product and the client's product were pretty similar, but there were still some points of differentiation. And if you aren't already calling those out in your PDPs, in your product titles, and particularly in your hero image, you need to figure out how to do that, because that's going to be really critical to compete. So in this case, these are the two search results, what it looks like from the customer perspective for the Amazon's Choice, or the first natural search result for shower gel, and also Amazon's private label. And you can see there's way better value if you buy the Amazon private label. And Bliss isn't necessarily, and sorry if anyone from Bliss is on the call today. If I apologize in advance if I've used any customer examples that are, customer-facing examples that are on the call. But Bliss is not necessarily going to go just lower their price point. Like, that doesn't make sense for their brand positioning. But they have figured out a way to call out two key differentiating points in their title: paraben-free and cruelty-free. So they've been able to do that to help differentiate their product, help it stand out, help the consumer, just when they're looking at the search results, identify that this product has differentiated features from Amazon private label. So I think this is kind of like a good example of looking for your unique selling proposition and figuring out how to message it in your title. There are even ways to do that right in your hero image. Amazon's been pretty loose lately about hero images and whether you're including text on them and other, kind of lifestyle type of elements. And I highly recommend figuring out ways to do that, because in this next example will really help you see it a little bit better. So these are the two search results for the leading brand, Samsonite, in this category. And I say leading brand meaning, they're showing up at the top of search results after Amazon's private label. And then here is the Amazon Basics answer to this consumer question, which is, how do I have an affordable hard side spinner? And I think this is like a bad example. Again, sorry if there's someone from Samsonite on the call, where Samsonite is charging, significantly higher price for the product versus the Amazon private label, but doing nothing in the search results to differentiate the product. This is going to result in loss of share of search results and ultimately loss of share and decreased sales. And so there's a real opportunity here. There are actually, after I did a ton of digging on these two product detail pages, some really differentiating factors that the Samsonite product offers. So there are way more colors and sizes to choose from on their spinner. I've listed them all here, but these are all things that are very different about the Samsonite product, which allow them to fetch a higher price point. But you can't see that as a consumer when you're in the search results. So really kind of what we would recommend Samsonite do is figure out a way in the hero image to maybe show a little image picture within picture of all of the colors and sizes that the product comes in. So you can immediately see that you're going to have a lot of choices. The Amazon Basics came in kind of some like primary colors. And maybe even figure out a way in some of the alternate images to call out some of the selling features of the product. So, it's a TSA approved lock, the wheels are really strong versus competition, whatever it is. I'm not a suitcase manufacturer, but, figuring out ways to really call that out and make it evident in the search results, maybe even in the title of the product. So that kind of talks about going on the defensive. I think, there's also a real opportunity to learn from some of the private label and figure out what is Amazon doing differently than you are to make the products really successful. And there's no magic here. There's no secret sauce. It's really, all these examples are starting with the consumer and working backwards. So the first one is really designing for online. We talked about earlier how Amazon engages in private label for a variety of different reasons. And in this case, it's a profit reason. The traditional canned format of the leading brand for this category for chicken noodle soup, is Campbell's. This is the first natural search result that comes up. but it's sold in cans. And I used to buy canned soup as my first job at Amazon as a senior, we used to call them buyers. And this stuff dents like crazy, and it's really hard to prep. And customers complain about it a lot. No one likes to receive dented cans. And so in addition, it's really heavy. And so that hurts the profit margins for the product on Amazon. If you're not kind of familiar with Amazon's P&L, obviously the weight is a huge piece of it because they have to ship everything and mostly ship it free-primed. Amazon identified this issue and they launched their own private label chicken noodle soup, which probably tastes pretty similar. I don't know, I didn't order this one. But it is at a higher price point. So, you know, we're fetching a few more dollars per product, which means that the shipping cost can be amortized over a higher ring. It ships in its own container, which obviously reduces the cost. And there's even some incremental consumer value in that the boxes are reclosable. And that's another complaint that comes up often with cans, or we would see in the reviews that I think it was even a soup manufacturer that told me this, that, you know, you can't reclose a can. And so you feel like, what do you do with the leftovers, et cetera? So, so this is a really great example of just completely designing a product for profit and online and removing all of the steps, all of the costs between production and consumption. This next example is not a private label, but it is one of my favorite examples of designing for online, and I'm sure Amazon will come up with the private label in this category. Powdered peanut butter, so revolutionizing the category from an e-commerce perspective. It retails for 33 cents per ounce versus the leading brand of 12 cents per ounce, and also has sort of addressed some of the key customer feedback. And obviously improve the profit margins for the product. So just a really innovative idea. Also some added consumer convenience, a lot easier for smoothies, et cetera. So I think that's a great example of designing for online as well. And then our last example is also Amazon private label. And Larkin, and we'll see in the next slide that this is a Larkin row, kind of makes a response to these products. But in fashion, there's some really interesting dynamics happening on Amazon where all of the natural search results for all, all keyword searches are typically, brands you've never heard of that are from overseas, that are seeing a lot of success on Amazon mostly in the FBA model, in selling really low priced, fast fashion. And I think this is one of the main reasons that Amazon recently launched the top brand designation, so that they can start calling out, if you do a search for like men's basketball shoe, you get all kinds of brands I've never heard of, but then they've given a top brand designation to Adidas and kind of like pushed it to the top of the search results. So you can see that they think this is a problem too. And I remember a former fashion executive leader at Amazon saying, we can put a really thin veneer over the customer experience and the search results on Amazon with kind of more name brands and establish some more credibility in the fashion space. But within 2 clicks, you're out of that, that veneer, and you're kind of in the natural search results. So if you look at the review, so these are the 2 natural search results for short sleeve wrap dress. And if you look at the reviews for these products, they're not great. And, they're about quality, they're about returnability, they're about sort of the work appropriateness of these articles of clothing, they're about the sizing, et cetera. And so Amazon's response to this is to launch their own short sleeve wrap dress and put it at the top of search results through ads and now actually through natural search results as well, and address all of these concerns, right? And I actually have this dress, and it's addressing all of the negative customer feedback from the from the branded product, and it's eating into the search results. Like if you search for most common terms within women's fashion on Amazon right now, you're going to get Larkin Row for a lot of the search results. And they've addressed each and every piece of feedback that was negative about some of the leading brands. So, the sizing, offering extended sizes, offering kind of like a more conservative cut that's more work appropriate, free returns. They even went as far to do Prime Wardrobe and include all of their private label in Prime Wardrobe. And the feedback is amazing, right? And then they've also got a lot of their great imagery working on this particular product and a lot of the private label as well. So, there's a lot to learn here by taking a really hard and close look at what Amazon's done within the private label space that's competing with your product, and what, changes you can either make to your product, or, what you can do to differentiate yourself in the search results. And then also what you can do from a marketing perspective to get very strategic and surgical on keyword terms. That actually brings up another question that I get a lot about Amazon's private label, which is, do we think they pay for those sponsored product campaigns? And I think they do. Maybe there's no transfer of money, but Amazon is not going to allow manufacturers to subsidize their private label. The whole reason that they're launching private label in some of these categories is to be more profitable. And so I actually think that they are, the cost of those ads are included in those item P&Ls, because there's an opportunity cost of not giving that ad space to a paying manufacturer. So I do believe that they're hit with those costs as well. No way to know for sure, but if I am thinking like Amazon, I would want my private label to stand on its own as well. So the last tactic that you can take, well, there are probably lots of them, but of the ones we're going to talk about today about private label, is being vocal. If you've got your PDP is your PDP, and if you're seeing ads in search results, if you're seeing, I would say rewind 6-12 months, and Amazon was actually making use of some really proprietary search banners and things that were not available to manufacturers from an advertising perspective. If you're seeing these things, say something to Amazon about them. Say something either in your weekly call, if you're having one, say something in your annual negotiation, bring it up. Because particularly the ads that have been on the product detail pages, when we've been vocal, when our clients have been vocal with Amazon about being really unhappy about that and how it's not feeling like partnership. I mean, they can do what they want with search, but on your PDPs, we've actually seen some success in having Amazon take them down. Sometimes we have to go back and bring it up again. But definitely be vocal and let Amazon, even if they don't take them down, let them know that because it gives you a leg up in the negotiation. Anytime that you can kind of tip it in your favor, I think you should take the opportunity. And this is one where it feels really, it feels really targeted. It feels unfair, competition, whatever. So, definitely say something to Amazon about it, and you might be able to get them to take the ads down. So I have a few key takeaways, and then, we can kind of move into some Q&A and see what kind of questions folks have. But first of all, I think, private label is not going to be the end of the world for your brand. It's not unlike other private label in other retailers or brick and mortar. You just have to get more strategic and figure out how you're going to compete and differentiate. It feels different because Amazon has a lot of data, but at the same time, it's not any different than a new competitor entering the market. We got to stay on our toes. Like we always have to stay on our toes on Amazon. And then I think really having a good perspective and view of the digital shelf and how your products are sitting on the digital shelf is key. Not just to understand the impact of the private label, but to see how your product may or may not be differentiated from competition. And some of those exercises that we walked through today, it doesn't have to be private label that you're, doing the comparing and differentiating against. It can be other brands in your category that are competitive with you. I think whenever you're designing product, I'm sure everyone does this in their practice, but we're really starting with the customer, working backwards. And I think for some of our clients, that practice is a little more fixed. There's a longer lead time associated with it. And I think this Amazon's private label and the competitive nature of e-commerce in general and the unlimited digital shelf is creating a lot of competition for manufacturers. And we're having to figure out how to take a more iterative approach to product development, where we can't just necessarily set something and forget it for 18 months. We have to really take a look. Do we need different pack sizes? Do we need new flavors? What do we need to really stay competitive? And so really starting with that customer feedback and working backwards is key. And not just the feedback on your products, but the feedback on competitor products. The reviews can also be really telling in what can help you be successful. As always, designing products for online, meaning taking as much of the cost out of the equation between production and consumption, is a good best practice. And then lastly, if you're seeing ads on your pages saying something to Amazon, bringing it up in the annual negotiation, making sure that that they know that and kind of taking advantage of that opportunity wherever possible. So I have a few resources listed here if you want to go do more research on Amazon's private label. I think probably the two best ones to look at are, there's one on here from Marketplace Pulse. They did a really exhaustive audit on all of Amazon's private label brands, how many they have per category, how many listings, how many reviews. They don't have anything about sales. I've only been able to find one source that had some estimates for that, but that's a great, if you're wanting to see if there's something competing with you or in an ancillary category, that's a good report to go look at. Amazon also has a full listing on their website. It's kind of hard to find, but that's the link for that. And some of these other articles also have some great information, kind of a little more category specific, sometimes deep diving into particular private label categories that Amazon's entering. So that wraps up our presentation for today. I think we ended up with a little bit extra time today. So I would love to engage the audience on questions, any sort of like comments. What are you seeing in your categories? I think all of that would be really interesting.
Thanks, Sandra, for today's presentation and supporting our Education Leadership Council and bringing really unique insights like this. So we really appreciate that. We do have a few questions to get to today. The first one is from Sean. He's asking, is there any way to predict or track whether or not Amazon is planning to release a private label product in a particular category?
Oh, that's interesting. I think a big leading indicator is, if you're the leading brand and you know that your product's unprofitable for Amazon, that's a good sign that they're going to try to find some alternatives to your product, whether through private label or going out and sourcing more brands. We all know Amazon doesn't like to sell unprofitable product. So I think that's a really good leading indicator. I think you can also look at products where categories where there are typically not great reviews. And a great example of that, we didn't include it in the deck, but is around Amazon Basics in electronics and some of the cords and cables, and they've got a huge business going there. And reviews on a lot of the third party FBA products or leading brands are sometimes mixed, with connectivity issues and stuff, and they've really gone in there and tried to address some of those comments. So I think if the products seem like they'd be unprofitable for Amazon, they've got a really low retail price to weight ratio, or if the leading brands have poor reviews, I think those are big opportunities that Amazon's going to go take advantage of.
Carlos is asking, what is a good source to get sales data from any competitor in Amazon?
Oh, well, you mean like share data or competitive? Yeah. So there are lots of providers that will give that to you for a fee. There's unlimited numbers of providers for that. So you can go and get like share data from a Profitero, for example, or a One-Click Retail, or I think Slice does it. They all get it kind of slightly different ways. Amazon provides it to top manufacturers. But across all the providers, the data is like kind of muddy. It's based on categorizations that people are deciding, or if it's based on Amazon's categorizations, their product categorizations are usually not accurate. So the data is a little bit muddy, but it can be directionally useful. I think that there are some free we provide some share of search information as well. I think there are some free resources that are pretty cool. Unicorn Smasher is great, and they'll give you like directionally correct sales data. It's just triangulated based on sales rank. for the products in search. And really, really what you care about is what's happening on that first page. And Unicorn Smasher will give you that, and it's free browser plugin, which is pretty great.
Eduardo has a question. I think this is directed at Amazon. I'm not sure, but he's asking, how can you contact private label buyers of consumer packaged goods? I'm assuming his question is see if we can contact, how do you contact Amazon private label buyers?
Oh, well, they have a team that manages it, and they're pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. So you can reach out there. People often ask me, like, how do we find a contact for X, Y, or Z? And when I worked there, a lot of manufacturers would reach out to me via LinkedIn, and that's considered sort of a normal thing. So I would just go ahead and do some searches for Amazon and private label and see if you can get the buyer for your particular category, and look there. I do think it's worth noting there, just like all new programs, we get the same question for like the Amazon Go stores, et cetera. They typically are not entertaining a whole lot of unsolicited inquiries about that. They're typically pretty laser focused about what they want and what they're going to go after, and pitching different partners on that. And we have some clients who are either doing private label already with Amazon. There's two different ways to do it. You can either be their private label provider, where it's your manufacturing. It's interesting when Amazon approaches you with an ask like that. It's worth remembering that if you don't do it with them, they're probably just going to go straight to your manufacturing facility anyway, and figure out a way to do it there. So that's one way. And then the other is through kind of these exclusive brands on Amazon, which isn't technically private label, but a lot of people count those brands as part of Amazon's private label business because they're exclusive to Amazon right now. But they're typically pretty selective about who they're going after, and they've got a plan. We've not seen Amazon engage with some of the unsolicited inquiries as much.
We have time for one more question. Angela is asking, how important is price adjustment in competing with Amazon private label?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to do you have a lot of points of differentiation in the product or don't you? And are you able to really clearly communicate those and for the customer to understand those? If your retail prices are a lot higher than the private label and you don't necessarily have a point of differentiation, I think that's a risky position to be in, and might be something that you want to take a look at in your product development strategy. But if you do have a point of differentiation, I think there are lots of ways to communicate it to the consumer. And some of those would be through the hero image, really clearly calling out what that is, or through the PDPs or the titles. Better if you can find a way to call it out in search, because that's really where the customer is making their first decision about products to look at. And then, if you aren't sure what your point of differentiation is, which it seems like manufacturers would, but I mean, I think a lot of the time we get really we know our business so well, and it's really hard to think about it. Look at your customer reviews. What are the customers, look at the word clouds. What are they touting as being some of the, really unique, like what's this unique selling proposition, and what do they think are the key features of the product that are so amazing?
That's great. Andrea, thanks again for hosting today. We really appreciate it, and also appreciate your partnership and your participation inside the GMDC ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
If this is your first time experiencing a GMDC Infocast, I'd like to make sure that you're aware that this session and all previous Infocasts can be viewed in the Archive tab on gmdcconnect.org, along with a schedule to register for future Infocasts. Please look out for some new and exciting ones coming up this fall. I'd also like to encourage you to get involved with GMDC in retail tomorrow and become a member. Today's Infocast is a small sample of what members have access to. GMDC is a business ecosystem that helps you connect and collaborate and find opportunities for growth with retailers and brands and service and supplier companies. For more information, please contact me at markm@gmdc.org. I'd love to help you find opportunities to grow your business and also get your company exposed to high-profile executives and decision makers. Thanks for joining us today. We hope your afternoon is as enjoyable and profitable as today's Infocast has been. Take care.